Welcome to our Parent Power webinar. I am Ruth Rumack, and we have with us today Jen Makuana, who is one of our most precious, wonderful people in our Ruth Rumack's Learning Space organization. I'm going to introduce you in just a moment, Jen, but I just want to welcome everybody and let you know we're going to get started. And I have a request. If you could take a moment and put into the chat the ages of the students that you're looking for information for, and also the school board, or if you're at a private school versus public school. That way I'll have an idea of who our audience is, and we can speak directly to those particulars. Also, just a little bit of housekeeping. We will take some breaks at the end of certain sections to have questions answered. And to those of you who sent questions in ahead of time, thank you. That was so lovely. It's wonderful to have our questions ahead of time so that we can prepare a really full answer for you. And we will be addressing those questions that we received early throughout the presentation. So let's see. Without any further ado, I think that we should get started. What do you think, Jen? Sounds like a good idea. She's on mute. Okay. Welcome to Parent Power. This is all about advocating for your students who need some extra support, those students who have been diagnosed with particular learning challenges or needs, as well as those students who have not yet been diagnosed. And one of the things that I feel about this presentation is it's a little bit like drinking from an open fire hose. There's going to be a lot of information that comes at you very quickly. We are always here to discuss things. If you wish to pick up the phone or send us an email, and you can chat to us further. But there's a lot of information. So take your notes or just settle back and listen. There will be a recording of this session, and you will have an opportunity to review things at a later date, as well as some handouts that will be coming your way tomorrow. So stay tuned. Let's get started. Here we go. Where are we? Well, let's go to the beginning, shall we? And we can take a look at myself first. My name is Ruth Rumack, for those of you who don't know me, and I am the founder and the executive director of education at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. We are a full-service academic support center. We work with students who, as I was saying before, have been diagnosed with particular learning challenges, as well as those students who have not, and everything in between, from giftedness with LDs, giftedness without LDs. We run a whole host of programs that we'll be talking about later, both individual one-on-one support programs and group classes as well. And I would like to introduce our very special guest today, Jen Makuana, who is our Director of Educational Operations. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Ruth. Very nice to be here.
Oh, it's always so good to chat with you and to share your knowledge. I'll tell you more about Jen in a little bit.
So one second before we get started, I just saw a little note in the Q&A that it looks like the chat is disabled. So Caroline, if you could look into fixing that and enabling the chat, then we can get those comments in there.
Is that my fault? Did I touch something? It could have been. You never know.
I don't think so.
Okay, let me know if there's a problem. And if you can't get into the chat just yet, we'll keep working on it, not to worry. Okay, that's a little bit about me. I can give you more information about me, but you can also check out our website, ruthrumack.com, and get all kinds of goodies and good bits of information about what we do and who we are. Let's look at the next slide. Here we go. All right. We're going to cover a whole host of things today, and we're really going to take you through the categories of exceptionalities, which I think is really important because a lot of parents and a lot of teachers don't know how things break down and what is considered an exceptionality and what falls under each category. We're going to talk a little bit about private schools versus public schools, assessment and referral process. That's going to be all up to Jen. And then we're going to talk a little bit about child and parent support, which is really important when you're going through this path or journey. It's a long journey. And I think to begin with, we may just want to take a deep breath in and let it out. Because if you're here joining us tonight, it probably means that you have a child or somebody in your life that needs some extra support. And they may be at the beginning of the journey where they've just been diagnosed. Maybe they're not diagnosed with anything yet, and you're just concerned because you're finding things very challenging and difficult, or your child is. And maybe you're halfway through the journey, maybe you're on the other end of the journey. But wherever you are, I'm hoping that you can take away some really good nuggets of information. And as I said to you before, we are always here to chat. You can pick up the phone, you can email us. This has been our expertise for over 25 years. And it's not our first rodeo. We've been through a few things, haven't we, Jen?
Definitely.
Definitely. All right, let's look at the next slide, our categories of exceptionalities. So this is really an important place to begin, I believe, because it's important to know what falls under each category and where these categories come from. So if we're looking at exceptionalities that are diagnosed through a psychoed, we're looking at the set of behavioral situations that would consider conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder, also known as ODD. And then under communicational, it is a little section that includes the learning disabilities. And this purple section, I think, is where most of the students that we see fall under, because it's just such a broad and wide category. So that entire category includes autism spectrum disorder. It also includes all of the particular learning disabilities, including language processing, visual spatial processing, visual motor, phonological processing speed, etc. You can see it in the list. So it's really wide. And I think this category is where, schools have the most accommodations available, and they are able to put a lot of things in place when you ask for them and when you know what to ask for. Under the intellectual side of things, we have the Giftedness program, as well as mild intellectual disability and a developmental delay or developmental disability. And then under the neurological and physical, we have anything that is physical or neurological that creates a limitation that requires special assistance, as well as the blind and low vision. And then the last category is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity, ADD, ADHD. Now, this is a really interesting category because although it is something that is diagnosable through a psychoed or through other means of other practitioners, it is not considered a learning disability in Ontario, but it does coexist with many other learning disabilities. So you'll often see students who do have ADHD as a diagnosis. And if they have an LD as well, a learning disability diagnosed as well, there are a lot of things that are available to them, a lot of supports that are available to them. If it's an LD without ADHD, that's one thing. If it's an ADHD diagnosis without the LD, then it is more difficult to get the support. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that. In Ontario, the Ontario Ministry of Education does not consider it an exceptionality. You can still ask for accommodations and push for an IEP, which is an individual education plan, but it won't go to the Iprc, which stands for, help me out, Jen. I always get
this. Yeah, Identification, Placement, and Review Committee.
Thank you. I just use the acronym all the time. I never stop to think about it. Identification, Placement, Review Committee. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the flow of where you start when you notice that there are challenges and who to talk to and where to go. But these two acronyms are really important. The IEP is the Individual Education Plan. That is something that can be created within your school without any diagnosis. If you as the parent feel that there are challenging situations, whether it's behavioral, academic, or in terms of executive functions, which is often accompanied with the ADHD, you can set something up within your school if you have the support of your teacher, vice principal, principal, maybe special education teacher as well. The issue, as I was saying, is that you cannot push for an individual placement review committee meeting, which takes you further and gives you more legal support if you don't have an LD that goes along with it. Okay, I'm going to answer a question that came from Robert, and I think I saw him on the list already. So Robert asks, what is involved in the gifted program? That's listed under one of our exceptionalities. How does it complement the regular school year? How do the students not fall behind on their regular school? And he describes that his son is in grade 5 and is taken out for several things already extracurricularly, and that the school learning plan is already accelerated to accommodate these absences. So in terms of the giftedness program, the official gifted program, you do have to have I don't want to say a diagnosis. You have to be, what is the word I'm looking for?
Identified.
Identified, thank you very much. Identified as gifted. And that comes through either a psycho-ed report or a special giftedness test that the IPRC committee would then accept the certain levels of scores, and then put the student on track to be part of the gifted program. That gifted program doesn't start until grade 4, and it is its own track, and it's its own separate classroom that you attend. Now, if your homeschool does not have a gifted program, then, and you've been accepted by the IPRC committee, then that means that your child would be offered a space at the closest school that has an opening in their giftedness program. It's not a pull-in, pull-out program. So once you commit to the giftedness program, if your child is doing other extracurricular things, that would be something that you would have to work out with that particular school and with the particular, probably the principal as well. So I hope that answers your question. We can come back to it again at the end, but it is its own special program within the Tdsb. Okay, let's look at the next thing. What is next? Next, we want to talk about ADHD, because as I was saying, it's one of these tricky things, and there are many diagnoses of ADHD. There are many students who may exhibit ADHD symptoms or signs, but are not necessarily diagnosed officially yet. And what I find most helpful is communicating as a parent, communicating to the classroom teachers and communicating to the school, the vice principal, the principal, what your child's strengths and challenges are. What we know about ADHD is that it is a common neurobiological disorder, and it can significantly impact a child's experiences at school. We know that it affects 5 to 12% of the population, and that's, officially 1 to 2, maybe on the 3 side of students in each classroom. The thing about ADHD is that it often does coexist, as I was saying, with other learning disabilities or other challenges. And we also know that, as I was saying, if it's only ADHD, you cannot get a legal document worth of accommodations, but you can make an IEP within your school. So let me see my questions here. I know
there was a question in the Q&A that I just wanted to bring up now, because I think it's kind of relevant. It goes alongside this. Is someone was mentioning that we didn't mention any of the psychiatric diagnoses on that chart, like specifically generalized anxiety disorder. And that is, I think, in the same kind of realm as ADHD, in which it's not recognized as an exceptionality, but it often goes alongside LDs. And, it's the same kind of thing where you can push to have that recognized on an IEP, but not as far as an IPRC.
And this is the distinction. And I think it's difficult for parents, right? Because you know that there are challenges, and these challenges are affecting your child's academic performance, especially if it's something as significant as anxiety. And that anxiety can come up in many, many different ways, and it can really be debilitating. So when it is a singular diagnosis, however, there is a section, it's not necessarily considered an exceptionality, but the school system does have provisions for students who do have psychiatric and psychological challenges that have been diagnosed. And there are platforms that can be accessed in order to get support and to make sure that the school is able to accommodate and continue to provide the right type of situation and also the right type of environment for that student. Okay, let's go through a little bit more. Somebody did ask, I think it's Patricia asked, what can you do if you have a diagnosis of ADHD, but not with a learning disability? And I'm just going to throw out a couple of quick suggestions. We're going to come back to these, I believe, at the end as well, when we talk a little bit about accommodations and what you can ask for. So some quick things: extra time on tests, instructions and assignments tailored to the child and their particular, let's say, strengths or things that they really enjoy doing. Lots of positive feedback, lots of positive reinforcement, and really working with the student and boosting their executive functioning skills. So that's a term that we use a lot. We incorporate it into everything that we do in our one-on-one classes as well as our group classes, because it's the basis. It's, the master controller of the brain are your executive functioning skills. And it's almost like when your executive functioning skills aren't strong, which in many ADHD individuals, they are not strong, that's almost like having an orchestra without a conductor. And, it's really challenging to get through a piece of music if you don't have a conductor bringing all the right pieces together. Okay, we're going to carry on with a little more of the accommodations and modification suggestions later on. What else have we got? So here's a funny thing: special education in private schools. Because private schools have their own systems and they are not required to implement an IEP through the Ministry of Education. They are operating as businesses or as nonprofit organizations. They operate independently of the Ministry of Education, and therefore they don't have to follow the same legal requirements that are established in the Education Act. That being said, most private schools that I know are quite accommodating depending on the level of need of your child. Also, there are some very specific private schools that are created just for students with LDs or just for students with LDs plus. So there are schools like the Willow School, wait, I need to know the name, hold on. The Willowwood. The Willowwood School, which is a K-12 school that caters specifically to students who have learning challenges, ADHD, among other things. The Claremont School is another wonderful school in the city that also caters to students with specific learning challenges. And then we have a whole bunch of other private schools that understand that they do need to support their students in a way that they are going to be successful. So most of the the big private schools have what's called a student success center or a student support center, where you can work with the school to particularly create a plan that will work for your child. So that being said, I think it's important when your child is at a private school to know what their strengths and challenges are. You have to know your kid, and I'm sure you do. You know what really gets them motivated. You know what things are demotivating for them. So you want to make sure that the school is the right fit. If you have a child who is really having significant challenges with their academic side of things, and they're at a very rigorous academic school, that's going to probably add more challenge to the situation than is needed at that particular time. However, there are also schools you may choose because that's a passion of your child. Maybe your child is at a school that's really got a great sports program and they love sports and it's everything that they talk about and think about and breathe and eat, and that's all they do all day. So perhaps that school is great for them on one level, but the academic side and the support that the school is willing to provide is not at the standard that they need academically. Well, that's okay, because if they're happy there socially, they're happy there, and they're motivated to go to school each day, then perhaps you can take it into your own hands to provide some extra support, some outside support. That's, we see a lot of students from private schools who love the school that they're in. It doesn't meet their needs academically with the right amount of support, but that's okay because that's what we provide for them. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Here we go. This is where we're going to get into the nitty gritty, and I'm going to introduce you to Jen Makuana. As I said, she's our Director of Educational Operations. And not only is she an incredible educator and has been doing so for many, many years, but she has 2 kids of her own who also have their own exceptionalities. So she's not only an educator looking at it from the outside in, but she is a parent looking at it from the inside out. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jen, and you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ruth. So yeah, my role tonight here is to take you through this flow chart. And by the way, this flow chart comes from the Tdsb Special Education Plan. Caroline is going to drop a link to this special education plan in the chat for you. It's a very big 200+ page document that's very comprehensive, and it really does a good job summarizing all of the different parts of special education in the Tdsb. This model is the Tdsb. There is a Catholic model as well, which looks very similar, but the terminology is just slightly different. So yeah, I have been through pretty much all of the pegs along the flow chart here. So I'm going to share a little bit with you about my experiences along the way. First, a little bit about my background and my kids. I've worked at RLS since 2008, and I've worked with students with a wide array of special needs in that 15 years or so. I've provided support both inside and outside of the classroom to these students, and attended Iprc meetings with parents and things like that. And then along the way, I also became a parent. And as Ruth mentioned, I have 2 kids that are both in the Tdsb, and they both have identified unique learning needs. So my daughter is in grade 6, and in grade 3, she was designated gifted. So we started the process. We went all the way through and got that designation. But then we stopped there. We didn't decide to go all the way through here to the IPRC and put her in any kind of gifted programming. And that came from a conversation that I had with her classroom teacher, who felt that that wasn't really the way that she learned best. And she was learning just fine in a regular mainstream classroom. And so that's what we did. She ended up moving on to the extended French program, where she is very, very happy. But my biggest takeaway from that is just because something is offered to you in terms of support doesn't mean that it's the best support for your child. And you know your child best, and you really need to consider kind of all of the options that are available to you if you have them. Sometimes that's the problem. Then there's my son. My son is in grade 3 this year, and he's really where the bulk of my experience comes from. We have made it all the way through down to here together, and I'm going to share all of my insights kind of along the path as we go through these. But just a little history on him. So 3 weeks into his JK year, we were called into a meeting at the school. So that's this stage right here, the school support team meeting. And this is only 3 weeks into his school life. So they had already kind of worked through these steps right here in the meantime. And then we got called in because he was having a lot of trouble managing his emotions. There were a lot of outbursts, hitting, running from the classroom, things like that. I kind of knew this was coming. He had some sensory issues in preschool, so I chose to take a very proactive approach. And I had booked a meeting with the school back in June before he ever started to let them know kind of what was coming for them. I honestly believe that that was one of the best things I ever did in terms of his advocacy, because they knew right from the very beginning, they knew that I was trying, they knew that we were aware of something, and they didn't just chalk it up to bad behavior, which unfortunately, when your child, has a lot of challenges, whether they're, emotional or academic or social, it often manifests in a way that looks like behavior issues. And the last thing you want is your child to be labeled just as like that kid who, we can't seem to manage. So I felt like all along, the school knew that I was trying, the school knew that, we were looking for solutions rather than just kind of like looking to kind of push it aside. So my advice in that regard is always be very open and honest with the school. Always, talk about your child's challenges, help them to see that your child is a child who needs support. My son had a really great JK teacher, and she was willing to try basically any strategy and any of the suggestions that I threw at her, and I threw a lot at her. And it was really helpful. But even with great teachers and great principals, there are still a lot of obstacles. And I encountered a lot of obstacles along the way, as I'm sure many of you have as well. But keep looking, keep asking, and really keep pushing. Back to my son, we had all of these interventions. This is along the line here, the classroom interventions. He had an individual learning plan. The teacher was trying all kinds of different things. They were having many meetings within the school, I am sure. But his behaviors continued. And in January of that year, my son was diagnosed with autism. So now we knew at least a little bit more about what we were dealing with. And it was actually the process in the school that really helped me get that diagnosis, because I had already approached my pediatrician about it. And she said, doesn't seem that way to me. But when I went back to her with the information that the school is really, noticing some big issues, then I was able to get the referral to the developmental pediatrician, and then I was able to get the diagnosis. So even though it was on my radar, it really helped to have those kinds of systems or things happening in the school to get us to where we were. So the very next day, I, jumped right on up to here and requested an Iprc meeting. Now, I was a bit naive at the time and thought that I would just get one right away, no problem. That was not the case. I was told that we had to have more meetings, and we kind of slid back on the scale here to, try some more things. Let's meet some more. And I kept kind of running into blocks of like, we're not doing the Iprc meetings. We need to meet more. We're not sure. It really felt like they were doing everything they could to avoid giving me the Iprc. In the meantime, I continued sending persistent emails. I continued asking, for more support for my son. It really wasn't enough for just the teacher and the EA in the kindergarten room. He needed more than that. The school had some not so great suggestions, like let's send him to school for 30 minutes a day only, which I told them that wasn't really going to work for us. And I just had to keep kind of pushing until finally I was able to get that meeting. It didn't happen until June of that year. So his whole JK year basically went with just a lot of, trying this, trying that, but really not getting too far. But I think it was that persistence, that my understanding of kind of what I was entitled to and how to keep asking for it. And then just sort of the positive and helpful nature that I kind of maintained all the way through was really beneficial in getting him to where he finally ended up, which was in that Iprc meeting. They, deemed him exceptional with autism. He was invited to join a special education class, first a diagnostic kindergarten class for SK. Unfortunately, those have been discontinued now by the board and are not available anymore. And then from there, he was offered an ISP, an intensive support program specifically for students with autism. And that's where he remains to this day, in a really great school. And we're really quite pleased with how things are going for him now.
Jen, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Yeah.
Because we have a good comment here on the question and answer, which is, from one of our attendees. Sometimes it feels like the strategies that you offer are creating more burden on the students to learn, on the parents, and parents to advocate, and on the teachers who want to do things and try things in their own way as well. And it's not a balance. And this question is, how do we find the balance? And I think you touched on it a little bit when you said, your persistent, but in a way that was, not overbearing, coming at it with suggestions and meeting them when they wanted to be met with, but also offering some situations and some suggestions or strategies. But I'm going to put my 2 cents in there first, and then you can add to it.
Sure.
That it is to find the balance. I think the balance comes over time. And there's sometimes when you're going to have to really push and really be persistent until you get that to that sort of next level or plateau. And then you can pull back a little bit and let the teachers do their job and let the students do what they need to do, until we run up against another situation where we have to sort of bump it up a notch again. But I'm going to let you put your 2 cents in that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's definitely an ebb and flow. I definitely have had times where it was necessary to kind of push a little harder, or then sort of fall back. But I would say that, running up against, teachers who want to do things their way, yes, fine, but that's not necessarily going to be what's best for your child. And that's not necessarily going to help them overcome the struggles that they're having. Some teachers are very locked into doing things their way because that's the way that's just kind of easiest for them. So I don't necessarily think that, you should fall back on that and be just like, well, that's the way the teacher wants to do it. If it's something that's really impactful in the way that your child needs to learn, then I think it is somewhat necessary to keep pushing for that, and until you start to see changes. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to approach those meetings that you're invited to at the school, so that you can find out kind of what's being done and whether it's working, and how do we know if it's working, and those kinds of things. Okay, so we're going to talk our way through this flow chart. And as you can see at the beginning here, it starts with classroom interventions and an individual learning plan. And there's an arrow between the two because these kind of go back and forth. So interventions usually start when somebody notices that there's an issue going on, whether it's the classroom teacher or the parent. Most of the time it's the classroom teacher, because most of the time parents aren't even aware that something is happening until you're invited to come to this SST meeting, which is what happened to us in the 3rd week of school. Although I had an inkling that there was some stuff going on just based on the reports that I was getting at the end of the day. But if you're privy to the situation, it's a great time to be suggesting, strategies and things like that work for your child. But the interventions lead to this individual learning plan, and then that can lead to more interventions. And then eventually it moves into an in-school support team. We'll talk more about that. And then from there, we go to the school support team. This is the one where the parents are invited. And then you can receive an IEP, what's called a non-exceptional IEP from there. But if you have an exceptionality, then you are allowed to proceed into this stage, which is the Iprc. So we will cover all of that as we go through here. So some notes about the stage 1, the classroom interventions. This is really the fact-finding stage. So the teacher is doing screening, they're doing assessments, they're trying to figure out what might be going on for your child in terms of why they're not learning, why their behavior is the way it is, what's going on for them socially, all of those kinds of things. At this point, they should be contacting the parent just to let them know that, like, hey, these are some things that I'm seeing. As a parent, your role is to, again, share any concerns that you have, things that you might be seeing at home, things that you may have heard from other organizations that your children might be involved in. It's also a good time to sit down and brainstorm your child's strengths and your child's needs, because those are going to come up a lot. And then it's also a great time to start suggesting strategies. So some of the things that I did in that JK year were to create my own visuals to help out the teacher with visuals that I know would support my son. Especially things that he was interested in. He had a big obsession with TTC maps. So we made visuals that used the TTC map that helped him kind of get through, his day. We brought in sensory toys. We made a calming corner. We had a communication book. all kinds of things. I tried to capitalize on his interests as much as possible, but I just tried to be like, hey, I'm going to bring this into you. Can we try it? Let's see if it works. Let's see if it makes a difference. Also, if you've already sought outside help for your child, get them involved too. If something is working elsewhere, let's see if it can be implemented in the classroom. If your kids come to us already, you can ask us. We use all kinds of tools, graphic organizers, color coding, pencil grips, things like that, that we see in a one-to-one situation are really beneficial for the student. And a lot of those things can easily be implemented in the classroom if only somebody will share it with the classroom teacher. And we're happy to do that for you as well. Then we move into stage 2, which is that in-school support team. And this is really just what it sounds like. The people in the school who are there to provide support meet. So that's the teacher, the CERT, the special education resource teacher, and the principal. And they are working on action plans. They're, continuing with that individual learning profile. And they're trying to come up with strategies that they can do to support the child in the classroom. Your role at this stage is still just to maintain that communication. Then we move on to the third stage, which is the school support team, or SST. Here's where you get invited. And in addition to yourself, other professionals are also invited to attend this meeting. So that could be a psychologist, a social worker, an SLP, or a special needs consultant. And the goal of that meeting is for everyone to evaluate the action plans that are currently in place. There is a lot of discussion around the students' strengths and challenges. The relevant professionals will also weigh in, which is really helpful. And then this can lead to the development of an IEP, or it can lead to referral for further support. So sometimes this is the spot where they might recognize this child needs to have psych ed done. Now, it's not exactly a timely process to get a psych ed done through a school. Sometimes it's necessary for parents to seek a private psych ed to get that done a little bit quicker. But this is a point where you may hear information like, this is what we think are the next steps to support your child. And then if you already have a diagnosis in place, this stage is also what could lead to the Iprc meeting. So your role in the meeting is to attend, always attend, take notes. We're going to talk more about that. Come prepared to provide further input. And this is also the time where you can ask for an IEP. So even if you don't have a diagnosis, or you have a diagnosis that doesn't qualify as an exceptionality like anxiety or ADHD, this is where you can be asking for that individual education plan to be put in place. From my own experience in SST meetings, and I've been to many, they're very fast. They're 20 minutes, hard 20 minutes. That is it. They will rush through. It always feels so rushed. It's this barrage of information coming at you, and you always leave feeling somewhat shell-shocked by the end of it. So we have some tips that can help kind of get you through those 20 minutes and leave with the most information that you possibly can. So firstly, it helps to know what to expect when you go in. They always follow the same format. There's introductions around the table. You get a copy of that individual learning plan or profile. The classroom teacher will read through your child's strengths and challenges. Then you're given a chance to speak. And then there's time for a short discussion with professionals weighing in. Then they move on to the next steps, and that's it. I highly recommend creating a binder for your child, a binder that has tabs, that has a way that you organize all of the information that you have on your child. So whether it's copies of their diagnosis or reports from professionals, whether it's meeting notes from other meetings that you've been in, things like that, but just have all of those things organized on hand. There's been many times in an SST meeting where someone, the CERT has been flipping through trying to find a report that she needed. And I'm like, oh, I have a copy right here. And then I just hand it right over. It saves time. The other thing is, don't be afraid to ask for what you think should happen. This is the time that you have all of the attention of all of the people that you need in the room. I had to ask for my son to have a safety plan in place. That should have been something that was just initiated by the school because his behaviors were quite pronounced and in need of safety concern, had safety concerns. But I had to insist numerous times in these meetings until I got that safety plan put in place for him. He was running out of the classroom and like would be gone. And like, it was really important. And I had to push and push and push to get that to happen. And then finally, I highly recommend taking notes, and I highly recommend taking notes in a very sort of organized way so that you have your questions in one place and you have places to answer those questions and you record who was there. So we have a little sample here, and this template is going to be included in your handouts. But what you can do is you can check off what kind of meeting it is at the top. Jot down who was present at the meeting. I find it's really helpful to remember what professional supports were available to you in that meeting, because sometimes they have some really great tips and strategies. Have your own list of strengths and challenges. Make a list of the questions that you have and record the answers to those questions right.
Jen, we lost your sound. Is that just me or is that everybody? Talk to us again.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can. Yeah.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Okay. Phew.
Good.
Thanks. Thanks, Miriam.
Okay. So one of the most important parts of this note-taking template is the last section, the next step section. You really, really need to find out how long they plan to try something, or it might just continue that way forever. So ask those questions of like, what are the next steps and what are the timelines for those next steps? How are they going to assess whether it's working, and when are they going to assess whether it's working? You want really definitive dates in place so that things don't just kind of drag on, because in my experience, that will just happen. Oh yeah, you again? Didn't we just talk? No, that was 2 months ago. So just have those definitive timelines in place when you leave those meetings. It's really, really helpful. All right. That brings.
We lost your sound again. Where are you? We need your voice, Jen. Well, you want to try it again? Give it a.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I don't know if there's just bad internet or what.
I think you're lagging a little bit, but I think we're good. I'll let you know if we lose it again.
Okay. So in the IPRC, this is the principal sort of plays the first role. So they are to gather all of the information, assessments, evaluations, anything that's happened for your child. If you have your own evaluations or assessments, you're to provide those to the principal. And they are supposed to provide you with a copy of that big guide to Spec Ed and an approximate date of the IPRC within 15 days of you asking for it. That was certainly not what happened for me. And you know, they never really gave me a real reason why it didn't happen. They just kept saying, we're getting to it. We're getting to it. We need more meetings first. So it is within your right, though, to keep pushing, because you are entitled to get that meeting, a date for the meeting, that is, within 15 days of asking for one. Your role in an IPRC is to give those documents that you might have. So if you've gone to a psychologist for a private psych ed, make sure you have copies of that to present. Make sure you attend the IPRC meeting, and then you also have the right to appeal if you don't agree with the decision. In the IPRC meeting, it is made up of a principal, your principal, also a principal from another school, a board official, and then a psychologist. And during that meeting, you attend with the classroom teacher. They will present the information. The teacher will present on what sort of things they're noticing. And then the committee decides if your student or your child will be deemed exceptional under the, you know, guidelines that they have for that. And then from there, they move on to the placement part of the committee, which is they decide on what would be an appropriate avenue to explore to help your child with the kind of support that they need. So that's bringing us back to that flow chart, which is here at the end. So there's two real possible outcomes from an IPRC. Your child can be placed in a regular class, or your child can be placed in a special education class. So let's go up to the top one first, the regular class. And within the regular class, there are 3 different forms of support that are available to your child. The first one is regular class indirect support. So here the classroom teacher is receiving a consultation from the special education teacher or some kind of outside supports. In my son's case, an autism team came in to work with the classroom teacher to help make her classroom a little more autism friendly. Regular class resource support entails individual or small group support from the CERT within the classroom. And this is the most common form of support that is happening in Tdsb schools right now. The CERT will come into the classroom, put together a small group and work with that small group. So it's not necessarily individual support. And in my experience, it's not typically individual support because there are usually multiple kids in any classroom that need support in any given area. And sometimes these kids haven't necessarily gone through an IPRC. Sometimes these are kids that they just like, we know this child needs help. We're not going to like leave him out because he hasn't gone through an IPRC. The CERT may still pull him into the group if the teacher identifies that that is a child that is also, in need of that support. And then the last option is the regular class withdrawal. So this is specialized instruction that happens outside of the classroom. So the child is maybe pulled out to the resource room, but this can only happen up to or not including 50% of the day. And in our experience, it's nowhere near that. It's typically 1 or 2 periods a week for 40 or 50 minutes at the most. And again, this is not as common anymore in the Tdsb. Probably most of you who have kids are seeing that it's a teacher that comes into the classroom to help. So that is one avenue. The other avenue that can result from an IPRC is the special education class. This is where my son ended up, the intensive support program. So there are intensive support programs, or ISPs, those are considered fully self-contained classrooms, and they come in all different categories. So there's one for autism, there's one for LDs, there's one for MID or developmental disabilities. Gifted classrooms are considered ISP programs, the self-contained gifted program, and then they also have them for behavior. They're often mixed grade groupings. So my son's class was a grade 1 to 3 autism class. They're only available through an IPRC. So a student who has not received a diagnosis, who has not gone through an IPRC meeting these options are not available. This option is not available to them. There's also partial integration from a special education class. Now, this used to be what was called the homeschool program. The homeschool program, unfortunately, is no more. The homeschool program used to be students would attend the resource room for half of the day. So this was the 50+% of the day, and they would do their language and math there. And then they would go to their mainstream classroom for the other subjects like social studies, art, music, gym, those kinds of things. So that program has also been discontinued, and now partial integration looks more like an informal part of the ISP. So my son actually has partial integration. Currently, he is part of an ISP class, but he is integrated into the grade 2-3 classroom for much of his day, and at some points for all of his day. So it's a program where they try to they have the support there for the students when they need it, but they also try to make sure that the student has the opportunity to learn in a mainstream classroom as well. All right. Ruth is going to talk to us more about what the special education plan looks like when your child reaches secondary school.
And then I think we want to take a couple of questions.
Yeah.
there are a few things, Jen, you can take a look at the Q&A. One of the things that I did want to talk about is the idea of if your child is not falling behind academically because they can keep up with their schoolwork and their general knowledge and they have significant support, but they can't function independently. So this sort of is the idea of going through, you may not be able to access the IPRC part of things without, as we said, a formal diagnosis, but the informal IEP is a really good place to start. And, if you have a classroom teacher, and it doesn't always happen, but hopefully you have a classroom teacher who's willing to try some things. It sounds like if they can't function independently, we want to dig a little bit deeper. And we want to find out what's going on, either with working memory or with executive functioning skills. So I would encourage you to be in touch with the classroom teachers or the teachers that are involved with your child to get a little bit more information and what you're seeing at home versus what they're seeing in the classroom and how they can work together to support a student in that transition of getting from, point A to point B, gathering all the information or the things that they need, and then bringing all of that back with them at the end of the day so that you can potentially support them at this point at home until we get more answers and we have more strategies. Okay, let me talk a little bit about secondary school and what happens when you have an IEP that's been set up in the lower grades, and perhaps an IPRC placement in the lower grades and how that transitions to the high school. We get a lot of questions about that from parents who have kids in grade 7 or grade 8. They're very concerned, they've had good experiences perhaps, or they finally, found a way to get the junior high to work with their student. And now they're worried that they're moving into a high school where they may be in a rotary system where they're moving from class to class, where they have 8 different teachers, where their child is going to be a little bit more anonymous. So let's take a look at special education at the higher level, the secondary level. One of the situations is you have a resource program, and that's where it's a regular classroom setting. Students can receive special education resource support from a special education teacher. That generally looks like, similar to what you had in the lower school version, where there is a dedicated special education teacher who is there. Your child will know that teacher and they will get support from them. There are things called the RSE at the secondary program level, which are special course options where you get non-credit bearing assignments for students to receive support. And that's something that is created through the IEP. And then there are some optional credit courses where you still get credit for doing that class, but there's something called the locally developed courses, which are developed at the school, in the school, and at that school level, as opposed to in the ministry wide. One of the more common things that a child who has an IEP and has been identified with a learning challenge or an exceptionality, they will be offered a GLE classroom and or a GLE credit. And that credit is usually something that if it's a full credit for the year, they will have it on their timetable where they will go to this class, and that class will be a class with other students who are taking the same credit. Often it should be a special education teacher who leads that class, and they will do a few things. Now it depends on the teacher, it depends on the curriculum that they choose to follow, but it serves the purpose of being that one GLE teacher is your support center. It's where that child goes to ask for accommodations for test taking or for assignment differentiation. That GLE teacher should also be in touch with all of the other teachers at the high school level to make sure that the accommodations that you've set forth on the IEP are actually being adhered to, and that student is getting the things that they have on their document. It also can take the form of learning strategies or teaching the student how they learn best. So part of the year may be, what is your learning style? What is your study style? How do you learn best? And giving student the opportunity to learn about themselves. In my opinion, when you have a classroom, a GLE classroom that is a balance between teaching the student how to advocate for themselves and more about what their strengths and challenges are, as well as being there as, that GLE teacher is the support person for that particular child and you as a parent, that's the best balance in my view, where they get to learn about themselves, but they also have somebody to come to who knows them well, who can go to bat for them if they need help in their other classrooms. You can get up to 4 GLE credits during secondary years. So basically a student with an IEP or with exceptionalities can take that course 4 years in a row, and they will get credit for it for showing up, doing the work that's asked of them in the class, as well as having an opportunity to use it as a study period and having that teacher there to ask questions and to support them as well. Okay, let's take a look at the next. I think we want to the last one, the intensive support programs, the ISPs. There are a small number of ISPs at all grade levels to support students with similar special needs. So that's, again, that intense support program where you're going to be placed, that child will be placed with other students who have similar needs, and the programming will be directed specifically at their level. And though you do have to go through the IPRC in order to gain access to those. All right, let's look at the next one. What else? Talking about the IEP development. And one of our attendees said, hey, I wish that I had this webinar a few days ago or last week because I'm going to my IPRC meeting or my IEP meeting tomorrow. So I'm sorry that we couldn't get it to you faster. We do actually do this seminar twice a year. We usually do it in the spring and we do it in the early fall. But don't be upset, because anything that you learn from tonight, even if you have to hand in your IEP suggestions tomorrow, you can always go back and send in sort of an updated version. And you can have that communication with the CERT teacher to say, this is what I've got so far. I'm working on a few other ideas. Can I send this to you in 3 or 4 days time or a week's time? Let me let you in on a little secret. These special education teachers are going to be inundated with suggestions and strategies from parents. It takes them several weeks to get through them all. So even if you send in your first draft tomorrow, you will have an opportunity to, update that as you think of more things or as you learn more about what's happening for your child this particular year. Would you agree with me, Jen, in that?
Yeah, I mean, teachers are very used to people asking for extra time for things. So don't be afraid to say, I need a couple more days to get those suggestions in. They won't mind at all, I'm sure. And secondly, an IEP is like a working document. So it's, I get a new IEP every term. But you don't even have to wait until the next term. Like if you have more suggestions to add, just send them their way. It's not a final thing once that deadline has passed by any means.
I really like what you said, that it is a working document, and the idea behind it, when you have been through the IPRC process and you have been identified, or your child has been identified as having these exceptionalities, it is a legal document. And what we put on the IEP is something that has some legal backing to it, which means that if you're not receiving the accommodations or the modifications that have been agreed upon, that you can take some further action. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, but just keep that in mind, that not only does it give you a piece of paper to hand back to say, hey, you promised me time and a half and my kid's not getting time and a half. At the same time, you can come back to them with more suggestions as different challenges arise. And even throughout a school year, a child may master one thing. We don't need that to be on the IEP anymore. And so we're going to make room for the next level of support. Okay, so IEP development. This is this document that, as we said, whether you've been identified through IPRC or not, you can still have an informal IEP. It sets out the goals or the outcomes for that school year. One of the things that has changed over the last few years is we used to put all of our wants and needs and like our wish list would go on this IEP, but it became really an unwieldy document. And so most schools and most CERTs are looking at, as Jen was saying, what do we need for this term? Like, what are we looking at right now? And we're going to put down the most important things, the biggest things in order of priority, and the things that are the most challenging for the student at this moment. So it is a list of accommodations, modifications, or alternative programming, or a combination of those three. And it also tells us the setting where the educational programming will be provided. And we want to make sure that the terminology is clear, not just to teachers, but also to the parents, and that the students understand what it is that they have the right to ask for, and that they know what they get or what they should be getting. So one of the things that I want to make sure we understand is that the process for the IPRC is currently the only legislative vehicle for ensuring the timely development of the IEP. And it is a multi-page document. I was just showing you the very first page of it, but it's pretty thick, and you got a lot of information in there, and we want to keep updating it so that it's meeting the needs of your student at this time. Okay, let's take a look. I think we're going to go to the next one. Yes, good. All right. So when we talk about the IEP, there are two big words we use: accommodations and modifications. And they're two very different things that have a whole set of different criteria beneath them. So the accommodations really refer to the how, the when, and the where of the program delivery. And when we look at three types of accommodations, we look at instructional accommodations, so how the instructions are given, how the lessons are presented. We talk about the environmental accommodation. So are we going to make changes to the physical environment of the classroom or the tools that the student is allowed to use? And then we also look, the third aspect is assessment. And how do we assess the child? Can we make accommodations in how we assess this child? So if we look at the instructional side of things, how the child is taught, we might ask for things like chunking information, which means you're giving the child instructions, but you're not giving them all the instructions at once. You're giving them one or maybe two instructions at a time, and the child works through that and then comes back for the next piece of information. Another one might be scribing. So instead of asking the student to write out their own answers, maybe we have somebody who's able to write the answers for them, either an educational assistant, sometimes it's the teacher. In most classrooms, we have the use of assistive technology, which we love. So spoiler alert, stay tuned for our assistive technology webinar, because we give tons and tons of tools and strategies around assistive technology. We use it in our classes all the time with our one-to-one students and in our group classes, and it can be a game changer. And if your classroom teacher isn't maybe comfortable with assistive technology, maybe they don't know about all the different things that are available, again, have a chat with us, because we can give you some really good strategies and tools to get your child working independently and feeling really confident. So those are examples of some instructional changes that will really change the outcome of your child's productivity and confidence and how they go about their work on a daily basis. Some examples of the environmental changes might be preferential seating, so sitting near the teacher, taking a test in a quiet location, maybe using headphones, noise-canceling headphones, so that they're not being distracted, taking more breaks. Those are things that we can implement. Those are usually the easier things to implement than either the instructional or the assessment, because they're concrete, they're tangible. On the assessment side of things, certainly we want to ask for longer time to write tests. If your child has a working memory issue or a graphomotor issue or a reading issue, we need more time. Maybe we need somebody to read the questions for the student, or we need some technology that will read the questions to the student, and then the student can speak their answers and the computer will type out their answers. Again, all sorts of different things that we can ask for in all three of these areas. All right, let's look at the next one. So the accommodations, I like this visual because I always identify with the littlest one that can't see over the fence because I'm barely 5 feet tall. And when we talk about accommodations, we're really talking about equity versus equality. And we want to make sure that it's not just that everybody has the same size box, because no one size fits all, but that we get the box that allows everybody to see over the fence and to enjoy the game, regardless of whether it's 1 or 2 boxes or none at all. One of the great things I think about what's changed in the last few years is this idea of universal design. And there are a lot of teachers are very well versed or becoming more interested in this idea of what's good for one kid is probably good for everybody. And so if you have noise canceling headphones for 2 students in your class, we're going to put 5 noise canceling headphones out at the center table so that anybody who needs a moment of quiet or more focus can grab those. It's not just for that particular student. But in terms of an IEP and the rights of the student who really needs them, they have to be there for that particular student. So these things are good for everybody, but we want to make sure that the ones who need them most get access to them all the time. All right, let's look at the next one. So another way to alter student programming is through modifications. And modifications are changing the what of the curriculum. And there's a very big distinction, and it's really important to know when you're asking for things, whether the IPRC committee has indicated that you are allowed to have modifications, which means changing the actual curriculum and what is being taught versus the how and the when and the where. Okay, so here's an example of somebody of a modification where we change the Ontario curriculum. So let's say we're studying Hamlet, we're studying Shakespeare. We may both, everybody in the classroom is going to learn about Hamlet, but for this particular student, they are going to read a Hamlet that is in, plain everyday English. They're not going to be required to read the Old English. They're not going to be required to, maybe they're going to read a kid's version or an annotated version as opposed to the full version. This is changing the curriculum on the what side in terms of, let's say the expectation is that you should read the Old English and you should be able to find the symbols in the Old English, etc. Versus the modification program is, I'm just going to, we're going to learn the story, and we're going to talk about the relationships in the story, and we may not get to the symbolism or the deeper meaning, but we're going to at least talk about parts of the same thing. So we're getting part of the same curriculum, but it may not be going as deep, or you may not be asked as much for as much depth in your own answers. There is a debate, I want to bring this up, that there is still a debate between taking the number of questions that a child is asked to do. Let's say it's a math assignment. This is a debate as to whether, if you cut the number of questions on a math assignment, for example, that it is considered a modification versus an accommodation. And the accommodations can be implemented with just an IEP, but a modification can only be implemented through the IPRC. So I've had this debate with several other educators, and the jury is still out. And I think it's an important one. If you are asking your classroom teacher to, let's say, cut the number of questions either on a test or on the homework assignment, that you have to clarify with them, whether that is considered an accommodation or a modification. I still haven't found a good answer for you. I'm still working on it, though. All right, we have another question here from Stephanie. I don't know if Stephanie is with us right now, but we're going to answer it anyway. Her son has recently been diagnosed with dyslexia, and a recommendation made for the Orton-Gillingham method to be followed, which is a method of teaching reading. How can I be sure the support offered by the school board is tailored to his specific needs when the teachers don't seem to be familiar with how to best teach those students with dyslexia? Okay, so this is a really hard question to answer, Stephanie, because the Toronto School Board and the Ontario School Board doesn't use an Orton-Gillingham approach. It's an approach to teaching reading and writing. And my suggestion would be to either go private, go for a private school that does teach with this specific methodology or technique, or keep your child in the public school and find the support that will teach him in the way that he needs to be taught. That is something that we do. We happen to be Orton-Gillingham experts, and we use the science of reading technology behind us to make sure that we are using the best practices in reading. There is a new mandate that schools are making the shift to the scientific approach to reading. The thing about it is that it's slow. And it's going to take some time before, all the teachers get on board and the pendulum shifts again. We spent many, many years, over a decade using this whole language approach, which does not work for students who have dyslexia. And the document, The Right to Read, really pushes more of a phonics approach, but, you have to know who your teacher is and what their interests are, and who what kind of camp they're coming from. So the idea behind this is that we're asking for explicit instruction, and sometimes you may not be able to get that in the public school system if the teacher is not trained enough, but you can find it in many other places. Give us a call, have a chat with us, and we can share more insight into that. Okay. Let's look at the next thing. So the next slide is about sharing your child's diagnosis and supporting your child. And I'm going to go back to the comment that we had earlier today, which is, it seems like a lot of work. Like you're asking the kid to do a lot of work. You're asking me as a parent to do a lot of work. You're asking the teacher, who may or may not want to follow through with the suggestions that are given. I have to say, it is a lot of work, and it's a tough process. And sometimes it can feel like an uphill battle. And sometimes when you as a parent are tired and, you and your co-parent or partner may not see things eye to eye, you may not see the needs of that student in the same way, or the level of support that student needs in the same way. And it's hard. And I would say, number one, take a deep breath and let it out. Many times. And, I talk to a lot of parents who really describe the emotional roller coaster that you are on when you have a child who has exceptionalities. And that's no joke. And you have to really take a moment to pat yourself on the back, give yourself a hug, have a glass of wine, whatever it is that you need to do. Talk to other parents who are also going through similar things in a positive and constructive way. We all need to sort of let go of the daily stresses. And sometimes that can kind of seem like a negative avalanche, and it's important to let go of it and to get it off your chest. But you want to talk to people who have been through what you've been through or you're going through, and you want to make sure that you have a good, positive support system that is solutions focused, that is not just about pointing out all the negative things that are happening, but actually give you some support in terms of moving forward and moving through those difficult parts. We get a lot of questions about, well, my child's just been diagnosed. Do I share with them their diagnosis or not? I'm afraid of labeling my child. I don't want them to use it as a crutch. And my experience has been, kids know when they are not performing in the same way that their peers are, and it affects them. And it takes its toll on their confidence and on their own stress level. So for most kids, I would say, when somebody says, hey, this is why you are so good at focusing for a long time on your Lego, but when your teacher asks you to practice your spelling words, it's hard for you to remember the spelling in the order that it's given. it can really be a life changer for many individuals when they realize that it's not my fault, that it's not something that I'm doing on purpose or that I even have control over. It's the way my brain is wired, and it's the way that I'm learning right now. We talk a lot about empowering our students and a growth mindset, and reminding them that you may not know something right now, but that doesn't mean that you won't know it in the future. Oh, what is going on? Something is happening. Hold on one moment.
While you're doing that,
Yeah.
Ruth, I'll just share that
Yep.
there's a really great website called understood.org.
Yes.
That is a really great resource for this kind of thing. And something that we just did in a staff meeting recently is we watched a bunch of videos. They have a video series called Through Your Child's Eyes. And they're videos with children with all different kinds of challenges. They're sorted by age level and different needs. And it's just like a little interview with this child where they express kind of what's going on for them with those challenges. And then there's experts that weigh in and things like that. But they were really, really powerful and really meaningful. And I think that they would be great videos to watch with a child who is also experiencing those challenges, because these kids really, they tell it like it is, and it was really great. And that website has a lot of other great resources. They also have a parent community kind of thing. So it's a really great place to look for that kind of support.
So I'll repeat it. It's understood.org. We can put it in the chat. That would be great. So I do recommend to share something. You know, you may be concerned that if you label it dyslexia or ADHD, or, you know, whatever it is, the label is, that it's not, that you don't want your child to get stuck with that label or think about themselves in that way. But I really recommend that you share something, because we all have a right to understand who we are, and we know, but having validation that it's not, as I was saying, it's not our fault, and it's not something that we can turn on and off, is really helpful. I think the explanation that all learners are different, and that our brains are just wired differently, and you may learn in this way, and I as a parent may learn in this way, or maybe you have some of the same challenges that your child is experiencing, and you can help them through it by sharing your experiences. Trying not to make, you know, to dwell on the negative parts of that experience too much, but, you know, sharing that it was tough for me too. And these things, I learned how to cope. I learned strategies. I learned how to, you know, do things in a different way that have allowed me to be successful. And remembering that, you know, reminding them that they're not alone, that they can talk to you, that they can talk to their peers, that it's not something that should be hidden, or, you know, there's no shame in knowing who you are as a learner and how you learn best. And that, you know, will lead to really great self-advocacy and being able to stand up and say, this is what I need. Oh my goodness gracious, I swear I turned off my phone. That's terrible and very embarrassing. Okay. Let's go to the next part. So one anecdote I have about that is, you know, there was a parent who was really concerned about sharing something, you know, sharing anything about the diagnosis. But I did convince her after several conversations that it's important to share something. And this child had ADHD, in a hyper ADHD with hyperactivity, which made it really hard for them to make friends, made it hard for them to stay focused in class. They were always getting in trouble, all sorts of things. But the child said, when they realized and they had an understanding of who they were as a learner and who they were, what was happening to them, the one thing that they said was, I'm not stupid, and I'm not lazy. And they came back to us in the next lesson, and said, guess what? I'm not stupid and I'm not lazy. Not that we had ever used those words with them, but she actually said, looked us in the eye and said, it's just that my brain processes things differently. And she said this with such a smile and such confidence, like, oh, okay, I figured this out. All right, okay, I can move on now. I can get on to other things. So I think that as a parent, we really need to honor our child's gifts, what their strengths are, really push them in the ways that they can express their gifts as well. And we look at supporting their challenging areas. We'll give them the support, we'll give them the confidence they need and the strategies and how to get through something and the tools to get through it. But we really want to take a moment to say, I just love you for who you are, even in those crazy moments where I would like to pull my hair out and, scream into a pillow. But at the end of the day, I love you for who you are. Okay. And one thing, as I said before, keep in mind that as a parent who has a child with exceptionalities, it's tough. It's really hard. And we have to give ourselves that hug and remind ourselves that we are also doing the best that we can. And some days are going to be good and some days are going to be bad. But at the end of the day, you want to know that you are there for your kid, and that you want to reach out to anybody else who can help you support that child. It takes a village. We know that for sure. All right, what's next? Oh, I think I talked a little bit about that, parents and advocating for support. So let's do a little reminder, make sure you keep those organized notes, build the relationships within the schools so that you can, you know who to talk to. You've got somebody on your side. There's an ally in the system for you. Follow the chain of command. I think that's an important one. You don't want to, complain about the teacher going directly to the superintendent. You want to try and work it out with the teacher. If there's a problem, you want to then go to the vice principal or the special education teacher or then the principal and follow that chain so that nobody, they won't really listen to you anyway, is what I'm saying, is they're going to push you back to the beginning and say, did you talk to this person and that person and so on. And then make sure that you are documenting chats and phone calls. One quick piece of advice, anytime you have a phone call or a chat in the hallway, because teachers are very busy at the end of the day, they may not be fully listening, but send an email after a chat or a phone call to say, just want to recap. This is what we talked about, A, B, and C, and this is what you said. If there's anything I've missed, please add it so that we have a document of, what our next steps are. What else? Finding a support network also can include not just partners and family members and friends, but joining Facebook groups and other organization groups. There are lots of Ontario-based organizations for specific LDs. There's the LDAO, which is the Learning Disabilities Association of Ontario, and they have lots of great resources as well. And in terms of making yourself stronger, like I said, pick up the phone anytime. We're here to chat, and we would love to guide you through some of these processes. All right, what else do I want to see? One other person today Naama asked if there is a gap between the student's evaluation in an assessment and what they see at home. What should they do? And there are two ways of looking at that. One is if it's the formal psychoed evaluation and what they see at home, keeping in mind that the psychoed evaluation has some very specific criteria. And so, you're looking at numbers and evaluations that are very, very clearly lined up and delineated as to what constitutes an LD or a diagnosis or not. If you're talking about something that you don't see at home, it could be because when you do a psychoed, it's in a very specific manner in that, it's either it's timed or you have to have a certain number of correct answers versus incorrect answers. And when you're at home, there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of, what you allow your child to do or what the context is, what the distractions are, what they aren't. We can have a private conversation about that, because I think that there are certain ways to go about figuring out whether it was a situation. I'm going to pause on that one. I'm going to come back to that. And Naama, if you're listening, then let me know. Stay on at the end and we can continue to talk. What else? Can we check the chat, Jen? Is there anything else?
Yeah, there are still a few more questions. Do you want to just sort of wrap up the end, and then anybody with questions maybe can stick around,
Yeah.
and we'll talk specific, because they are quite specific questions.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's look at the last slide. So you've heard a little bit about what we do. We are an academic support center. We provide one-to-one support, one teacher working with one student, either online through Zoom or in person. We're still in person, yay. And we have a very specific way of working with our students. It's very detailed, it's very personalized. We want to make sure that the student is supported as a whole, or any other diagnoses that come to us. We work with classroom teachers, we work with the special education teachers, and we really create a plan that is personalized and individualized for the needs of that particular child. We go to bat for them, we advocate for them, we give you lots of resources and support as well. So if there's anybody who has any questions about our one-to-one support, definitely let us know. We also do test preparation. So if you're looking to take the SSAT to get into a private school in the middle level, or the SAT or ACT to get into university in the States, we do that as well. And then we have tons and tons of academically focused group classes where we're working on writing skills, reading skills, math skills, organizational skills, executive functioning skills, you name it. I think we've got a course for it. Typing skills, assistive technology skills. And these are things that are, you can take in a short term, and they are small groups, still usually under 12 students, but they are very targeted with the same flavor that we bring to our one-to-one and the same knowledge and expertise. We have built these very fun, engaging, particular classes that can really work on one academic skill or a group of skills related in a short period of time. So I invite you to check back with us, and we do have another webinar coming up, and I hope that Caroline knows what it is and she can put it in the chat, unless Jen knows what it is, but you'll find out. Keep watching your email inbox and we'll let you know what our next webinar is. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Jen, for all of your really amazing expert, personal and professional advice.
You're very welcome.
We will see you all soon. If you have to jump off, if you want to stick around and listen to our answers, this is kind of where the nitty gritty comes out. We would love to have you. So what have we got?
Okay, someone was asking about early trauma that manifests itself in a very similar way to autism, and wondering whether their child that has those similar challenges, but not an official diagnosis, can also get the ISP class. So, and they talk about how there are special schools for kids who are very anxious, but those aren't necessarily a good fit for their child. Just because of the way that anxiety manifests itself. So unfortunately, to get in an ISP class, you do need to have one of the official diagnoses that the Ministry of Ed does recognize as an exceptionality. So that is really the only avenue to get into an ISP class in the public school system. But there may be special schools, not necessarily for kids who are very anxious, but other kinds of private schools or things like that, where you may find a supportive environment or a kind of maybe low-key environment that is maybe better suited to your child. And then you can also ask, just in terms of, within staying in the public system, you can ask for the different kinds of supports that you need as well. And you can still you can still get an IEP, you can still get different kinds of supports in place that might be beneficial to your student. It just isn't necessarily going to come in the form of a small class size like an ISP is.
I wanted to add to that too, that, we've worked with many students over the years who have a whole host of challenges. And what we find is that, sometimes we can work with the school and create almost a hybrid model where they may be in their regular classroom for most of the day, let's say. Now, these are really these are not typical situations, but this is something that you know, if it's something that might work for you, you might want to bring it up with your principal. In that, if a student can't handle being in the classroom all day, but you still want to be enrolled at your public school and you want to be, you know, make sure that they have the social outlet and all of the other benefits of that education, we can work with the school to provide some of their daily programming, you know, the reading or the writing or the math, outside of the classroom in our location or through Zoom, where it's a tailored program specifically for that child's needs. And when they're working with the same, you know, loving, wonderful, caring teachers, and they have that consistency and they have a safe space where they feel that they can come and do their work, it can really change things and it can really help that student through the trauma. We're not psychologists, and I would definitely say we want to be working with the professionals as well, but having a place that is sort of their own outside of the stresses of the classroom may also be beneficial. So there are lots of hybrids and different models that we've worked with over the years. We've also worked with parents who have chosen to homeschool their children, take the curriculum into their own hands, but they're handing off the academic parts of the curriculum to us, and they are taking care of some of the other experiential parts of the curriculum. So again, it's worth a conversation if it's something that you think might fit for your family.
Good. Someone else commented in regards to that in terms of girls with these kinds of needs often fall between the cracks because they don't act out, they only act in. And I totally get where you're coming from with that. I often feel that one of the reasons that my son got the support that he did is because he was acting out. And you know, the squeaky wheel is the one that gets that grease. And it's very important if you have a child who is more of the act in kind of thing, and it's very true that it's particularly relevant to girls, that you need to be that person who's persisting and asking for support, because the school isn't going to come to you in 3 weeks, into JK,
right?
Like they did for me. So it's really important to be that person who advocates and speaks on behalf of your child, because they definitely don't seem to get noticed as easily. And then we had another question about giftedness. They've been invited to the Iprc meeting, but they're now looking for what we should look for in an in-school IEP for giftedness. And is there a disadvantage of rejecting the IEP or dropping out of a giftedness program? So like I said at the beginning, the gifted program was not probably going to be a good fit for my child. And I kind of knew that. She was doing really well in the classroom. She was doing really well socially. She was doing really well academically. And the gifted program tends to be kids who really need to think about problems or situations or just academic pursuits in a different way. And they need to access the curriculum in a different way than the regular kind of classroom. And my daughter was doing really well in a regular classroom, so we decided not to mess with that. But if you have a child who maybe isn't doing so well in a regular classroom, maybe they have the giftedness designation, but maybe they're not performing up to the standards that you might expect from that, because maybe the way that the curriculum is presented isn't really working as well for them. So then you need to look for putting things on the IEP that gives that student the opportunity to access the curriculum in a slightly different way. So do they have to do the same kind of presentation as everyone else, or can they look at it from a different approach? Because gifted thinkers often have a very different way of thinking about things and approaching problems in a very different way. So do they have the opportunity to do that? Is there some flexibility in terms of how they complete assignments? Another big thing that we see in our gifted kids is anxiety and frustration. And so you want to be on the lookout for those and see whether the supports that are in place in the classroom are addressing those kinds of challenges that your child might be seeing as well. But really deciding whether to, stay in the regular classroom with an IEP for giftedness or going into a giftedness program is really, I think, a decision that you have to make, you know, in consultation, probably with a teacher who knows your child really well. And then just, you know, as a family, just decide whether that is something that you think is a good fit. If you know anybody who's in a gifted program and you can get a little bit of insight into what a day looks like, what a classroom looks like, that's also really great information. Unfortunately, they won't let you go, or at least they told me that we weren't allowed to go and visit one to see what it's all about. But if you can ask around and try to find out more information, that can sometimes be really helpful, especially if you can find out more information about the particular school that you think you would get the placement in. They're definitely not for everybody, I will say that.
In terms of a disadvantage, I don't think there's a disadvantage to saying no, thank you. You know, if you feel that it's not the best place for your child, and it sounds like your child is doing a lot of extracurricular things that, you know, probably feed them emotionally and creatively, so that perhaps the gifted program isn't what they need. But if your child, you know, perhaps is bored in class or is, as Jen said, not living up to the standard of academics that you think that they are capable of, perhaps it is because there just isn't enough challenge in the classroom. So, but I don't think there's a disadvantage if you come to the conclusion that it's not the right place for your child. It certainly won't count against them, and the school will not look at them in any negative way if you say no thank you to the gifted program. And I do believe, Jen, you may know better than I do, but I do believe that you can reapply. You know, if your designation doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't. But I don't believe that. I'm not at any time. I think I recall the way they put it to me is like the program starts in grade 4, and you'll have an opportunity to join again in grade 9.
That's what I was about to say, that I believe that you either start in grade 4 or you can start in grade 9. Yeah. All right. I'm going to, let's check. If there's anybody else, if anybody else has a question, we'd love to answer it. We're getting lots of thank yous. And for those of you who are still here, we will be sending out, as I said, a handout package, but we're also going to ask for your feedback. So, you know, we love to know what's working, and we also love to know what wasn't working, or if we missed something that you wanted to know more about. Of course, we only have a limited time, but I would love your feedback, because we use that feedback to help the presentation for the next time. And this presentation will come up again in the spring. So if you want to join us again in the spring, maybe your situation will have changed, or you'll have more insight or experience, and you will have different questions. Join us again, because, you know, as I said, you're drinking from the fire hose right now, and there's a lot of information coming at you. What else have we got? Anybody else? I don't think so. All right.
I see.
Anybody? Yeah, you want to check? Got a couple more.
No, the last one was more of a comment than a question.
So. Okay, super. Well, I really appreciate everybody's time, and I encourage you to pick up the phone or send us an email if you want more information. And we really look forward to having you at our next webinar. Thanks a lot, Jen. We'll see you soon.